Cancel the engagement party. The command froze every customer inside the little neighborhood bakery. 50 custom cakes had already been designed. The city's most exclusive celebration was only days away. His furious fiancée reached for the contract, convinced the plus-size baker had finally accepted the largest order of her career. Instead, Clara Bennett quietly slid the billionaire's black card back across the counter. "I'm sorry. I won't bake a lie." Nobody understood. Not the staff, not the customers. Not even Damien Moreau, the mafia boss who had spent his entire life watching people compete for his approval. His fiancée laughed at the baker's mistake. "You've just turned down the richest man in this city." Clara simply folded the order form in half. "I sell cakes that celebrate the truth. And I won't write the perfect couple for people I know aren't one." For the first time in years, the most powerful man in the room smiled. His engagement ended that same morning, but what brought him back to the bakery the very next day had nothing to do with the 50 cancelled cakes. The silence inside the bakery lasted only a few seconds after Damien Moreau walked out. Then every customer started talking at once. Did she really just reject him? She's finished. No business survives after embarrassing a man like that. Clara Bennett didn't answer a single comment. She simply picked up the next order ticket. Number 34. An elderly woman stepped forward with an apologetic smile. "I hope I'm not causing trouble." Clara returned the smile. "Not at all. What are we celebrating today?" "My granddaughter's 8th birthday." "What does she love?" "Strawberries. And dinosaurs." Several customers chuckled. Clara grabbed her notebook. "Then she'll have a strawberry dinosaur." Within minutes, the bakery sounded normal again. Coffee machines hissed. Children pointed at colorful cupcakes behind the glass display. Fresh bread filled the room with the warm scent of butter and cinnamon. It was almost as if the city's biggest scandal had never happened. Almost. Because outside, across the street, a black SUV remained parked with its engine idling. Inside, Damien sat quietly in the back seat. His longtime security chief glanced into the rearview mirror. "Sir?" No response. "The engagement venue keeps calling." Silence. "The board wants to know if today's announcement should be postponed." Damien continued watching the bakery window. Customers entered. Customers left. Nobody looked frightened. Nobody treated Clara like someone who had just challenged one of the most powerful men in the country. Finally, he spoke. "How long has that bakery been there?" His assistant checked a tablet. 12 years. No lawsuits. No tax violations. No complaints, except one customer who said the cinnamon rolls sold out too early. For the first time that morning, Damien almost laughed. The news exploded before sunset. Billionaire mafia boss cancels engagement. Every media outlet blamed something different. Some said financial disagreements. Others claimed political pressure. Nobody mentioned the bakery. Damien made sure of that. He never spoke publicly. Neither did Clara. She spent the evening frosting birthday cakes. The next morning arrived, like every other Tuesday. At exactly 7:30, the bakery doors opened. Regular customers were already waiting. Construction workers, teachers, parents carrying sleepy children. College students desperate for coffee before class. At 8:12, the bell above the door chimed. Everyone looked up. The room instantly fell quiet. Damien Moreau had returned. Without bodyguards, without assistants, without the expensive tailored coat he usually wore, only a simple charcoal jacket. He stood at the end of the line. Customer number 19. Nobody knew what to say. A young cashier whispered nervously, Should we let him go first?" Clara didn't even look up from decorating a lemon tart. "No," the cashier blinked. "But he has ticket 19. So he'll be served after 18. The cashier swallowed. Yes, Clara. Damien heard every word. He said nothing. For nearly 25 minutes. He waited. A little boy couldn't decide between a chocolate cookie and a blueberry muffin. Damien waited. A retired couple spent 5 full minutes discussing pie fillings. Damien waited. A woman accidentally dropped her wallet, and everyone helped gather the coins. Damien waited. No phone calls. No complaints. No special treatment. When his number finally appeared, he stepped to the counter. Clara smiled with exactly the same expression she had given every customer before him. Good morning. What can I get for you? He looked at the display. I'll have. He paused longer than expected. 1 blueberry muffin. Anything else? No. She placed it into a small paper bag. 4.25. He handed her a $100 bill. She slid it back. Exact change or card, please. He stared at the bill, then at her. You don't accept cash. We do. But not when we don't have enough change this early. He slowly reached for his wallet. The cashier looked ready to faint. Damien pulled out a simple debit card. The payment went through. Clara handed him the muffin. Thank you. Have a nice day. That was it. No apology. No awkward conversation. No mention of yesterday. He left carrying a single muffin. His driver glanced at the paper bag. Sir, you don't eat muffins. I know. Should I give it to the security team? Damien looked out the window. No. He drove all the way back to his office. The muffin remained untouched on his desk until evening. Not because he disliked sweets, because somehow it felt wrong to eat the first thing anyone had ever sold him without trying to impress him. The following morning, he came back. Customer number 26. This time, 1 chocolate cookie. Nothing more. The day after that, 1 cinnamon roll. Again, he waited in line. Again, no priority. Again, Clara treated him exactly like everyone else. Soon, the regular customers began recognizing the pattern. Monday, cookie. Tuesday, muffin. Wednesday, cinnamon roll. Thursday, apple turnover. Friday, croissant. An elderly man leaned toward Damien while they waited. Trying everything on the menu? Damien answered honestly. I suppose I am. The old man laughed. Good luck. The peach scones sell out before 9. Damien nodded seriously. I'll remember that. A week later, he arrived 20 minutes earlier, only to discover 6 retirees had beaten him there. One of them waved cheerfully. Morning! Damien actually nodded back. Morning. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. The man newspapers called Untouchable was discussing weather forecasts with senior citizens while waiting for fresh pastries. Then came the morning that changed everything. The bakery was unusually busy. A local elementary school had placed a large order. Parents crowded the entrance. The line stretched onto the sidewalk. Damien quietly joined the end. 38 minutes passed. 39. 40. Finally, only 1 customer remained ahead of him. The cashier smiled. Next, Clara flipped the small wooden sign hanging beside the register. Closed. The cashier looked confused. But there's still 1 customer. Clara nodded. I know. Our posted hours end at 2. We close at 2. Every employee looked toward Damien. The entire bakery held its breath. Surely this time, she would make an exception. Instead, Clara walked around the counter. I'm sorry. We're closed for today. If you'd like, we'll be happy to serve you tomorrow morning. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Then Damien looked at the sign, looked at the clock. 2 p.m. Exactly. He slipped his hands into his pockets. I'll come back tomorrow. He turned and walked away. The customers watched him leave in complete disbelief. One little girl tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, was that really the billionaire?" Her mother smiled. "I think." She glanced at Clara, who had already begun cleaning the counter. Today he was just another customer, and for reasons Damien himself couldn't yet explain. That felt better than being the most powerful man in the city. By the second week, the bakery no longer fell silent when Damien Moreau walked through the door. People simply made room as the tall man took his place at the back of the line. Children stopped staring. The retirees greeted him by name. Even the college students, who had once secretly taken pictures of him, gradually lost interest. Something unusual had happened. The city's most powerful man had become part of the bakery's daily routine, not because he owned it, not because he sponsored it, simply because he always waited his turn, every morning, without fail. One rainy Thursday, the line moved slower than usual. A young woman stood in front of Damien, nervously holding a small notebook. She turned around 3 different times before finally speaking. "Mr. Moreau," he looked up. "My husband lost his job. I've been sending applications everywhere." "I know this isn't appropriate," she hesitated, "but could you possibly recommend him to one of your companies?" Several customers lowered their eyes. Everyone expected Damien to reach for his phone. That was how powerful people solved problems. One phone call, one signature, one favor. Instead, Damien asked quietly, "Has he already applied through the company's hiring office?" "Yes." "Then he'll be evaluated the same way everyone else is." The woman looked disappointed. "But if I interfere," Damien interrupted gently, "someone more qualified might lose that position." She slowly nodded. "I understand." When she reached the counter, Clara had heard enough of the conversation to understand what had happened. As the woman gathered her pastries, Clara slipped an extra cinnamon roll into the bag. "You forgot one. I didn't order that." "I know. It's from today's leftovers." The woman smiled gratefully before leaving. Damien watched the exchange. "You gave it away." Clara shrugged while preparing his coffee. "It would have gone stale tomorrow. You could have sold it." "I'd rather feed someone." He considered her answer for a moment. "You lose money that way." She smiled. "My father used to say, profit keeps a bakery open. Kindness brings people back." She handed him his coffee. I found he was usually right. That afternoon, curiosity finally won. Instead of driving back to his office, Damien remained parked across the street after closing. He wasn't watching Clara. He was watching what happened after the customers disappeared. At exactly 6 o'clock, she flipped the sign to closed. The employees went home. The lights in the front dining area dimmed. Yet another light came on in the kitchen. Through the back window, Damien saw her working alone, mixing dough, preparing fillings, labeling tomorrow's orders by hand. No expensive machines, no assistants, no shortcuts. Nearly 2 hours passed before she finally sat down. She opened an old wooden box that looked older than the bakery itself. Inside were dozens of handwritten recipe cards. Some were stained with flour. Others had faded ink. She picked one up carefully, ran her fingers across the handwriting, then smiled. Not the smile she gave customers, a quieter one, the kind reserved for memories. The next morning, Damien arrived even earlier. This time, there was almost no line. When Clara handed him his usual pastry, he nodded toward the wooden recipe box resting on a shelf. "Family recipes?" She glanced at it. "My father's. He wrote every recipe by hand." "You still use them?" "Every day. Even when people tell me modern recipes are faster." Damien stirred his coffee. What made him so special? For the first time, Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she wiped a little flour from the counter before speaking.
My father believed people never truly remembered a cake. Damien frowned. He baked for 40 years. He said nobody remembered the butter, or the sugar, or the vanilla. They remembered how they felt when someone placed that cake in front of them. She smiled faintly. So every cake carried a promise. If someone celebrated love, the cake should represent love. If someone celebrated hope, the cake should represent hope. And if the words written on top weren't true, then the cake became part of the lie. Damien remained silent. Clara continued. When I was 16, a wealthy businessman offered my father 5 times the normal price. He wanted a huge anniversary cake. But the woman wasn't his wife. My father refused. He came home with empty hands. We barely had enough money for groceries that week. Damien listened without interrupting. I asked him if he regretted saying no. What did he say? Clara smiled at the memory. He told me, "We don't decorate lies, because one day we'll forget the money, but we'll always remember what we agreed to become for it." The words settled between them. Neither spoke again for nearly a minute. Later that afternoon, Damien sat alone in his office. The cancelled engagement contract still rested inside his desk drawer. For the first time since walking away from his fiancée, he unfolded it again. His eyes stopped on the sentence planned for every cake. The perfect couple. He remembered Clara's calm voice. "I sell cakes." Not lies. At first, he had assumed she was judging him. Now, he wasn't so sure. She hadn't accused him. She hadn't insulted him. She had simply refused to help him pretend. There was a difference, one that suddenly felt impossible to ignore. That evening, Damien called his chief investigator. "I need you to look into something." "The engagement?" "Yes. I want facts. No assumptions. No favors. If there's something I should have known, I want proof." The investigator hesitated. "Sir, are you certain?" Damien looked out toward the city lights. "For years, everyone around me has told me exactly what I wanted to hear. I think it's time someone tells me the truth." Across town, Clara locked the bakery door. She never learned about the phone call. She never imagined that one sentence spoken over a wedding cake had just set the most powerful man in the city on a path that could change both of their lives forever.
3 days later, Damien's chief investigator walked into his office carrying a thin grey folder. It wasn't thick. It didn't need to be. Truth rarely took many pages. "It has been verified." Damien looked up from his desk. "Everything?" "Phone records. Financial transfers. Private travel. Photos. No speculation. Only evidence." The investigator placed the folder on the polished wood. "I wish I had better news." Damien opened it. Each page confirmed what Clara had refused to help him hide. His former fiancée had maintained another relationship for nearly a year. There were expensive gifts purchased with money diverted from a charity foundation, secret vacations, private dinners, messages that left no room for misunderstanding. By the last page, Damien quietly closed the folder. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. He was embarrassed. Embarrassed that a woman who had met him only twice had protected his dignity more honestly than the people surrounding him every day. Across town, Clara's bakery was busier than ever. Not because of publicity, because Saturday mornings always brought families looking for fresh pastries. Children crowded around the display case. Parents debated between cinnamon rolls and blueberry scones. Clara laughed as a little girl insisted her cupcake absolutely needed purple frosting, because dragons like purple. It felt like an ordinary morning, until every phone inside the bakery vibrated at once. One employee looked down. "Oh no!" Another covered her mouth. "Clara, You need to see this. A live stream filled the screen. Damien's former fiancée stood behind a podium surrounded by microphones. Camera flashes exploded across the room. She wore white. Simple. Elegant. The perfect image of someone asking for sympathy. Her voice trembled just enough to sound believable. I remained silent, as I hoped to protect everyone's reputation. But I can't stay quiet anymore. Reporters leaned forward. She took a slow breath. Our engagement ended because someone interfered. A giant photograph appeared behind her. Clara's bakery. The logo. The front entrance. Then another picture. Clara standing behind the counter. Gasps filled the press room. I believe this business owner intentionally manipulated my fiancé. She inserted herself into our relationship. She humiliated us publicly and destroyed our wedding. Within minutes, the live stream spread across every major social media platform. The comments arrived even faster. Homewrecker, attention seeker. She wanted a billionaire. Boycott the bakery. Someone posted the bakery's address. Another encouraged people to leave one-star reviews. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became tens of thousands. By lunchtime, the bakery's rating had collapsed. Customers began cancelling birthday orders. Wedding consultations disappeared. A supplier called asking whether future deliveries should be postponed. One employee quietly approached Clara. I understand if business slows down. But I can't afford reduced hours. Clara nodded. I know. You should take another job, if you find one. The young woman stared. You're not firing me. No. I won't ask anyone else to carry the cost of my problems. The employee's eyes filled with tears. I'm staying. One by one, every staff member said the same thing. Not because they knew what would happen, because they knew who Clara was. That evening, the bakery closed earlier than usual, not from lack of work, from lack of customers. The dining room that usually echoed with conversation sat almost empty. Half the bread remained unsold. Boxes of pastries lined the shelves. Clara quietly packed everything into paper bags. A volunteer from the neighborhood shelter arrived at the back door. You have another donation? She smiled. They're still fresh. Someone should enjoy them. The volunteer hesitated. Business must be difficult. Clara tied another bag. It will pass. You seem very calm. She looked around her father's bakery. I've already lost someone I couldn't replace. I don't think poor sales are the worst thing that can happen. Meanwhile, Damien watched the same live stream replay in silence. He never made it past the second minute. He turned the screen off. His assistant waited. Should our legal department issue a statement? No. Should we threaten the networks, repeating the accusations? No. Then what would you like us to do? Damien stood. For weeks. I've been learning something. His assistant frowned. What's that, sir? That the truth doesn't become stronger because the loudest person repeats it. He picked up his coat. If Clara has survived this long without defending herself, I won't speak for her. The assistant looked confused. Then why are we leaving? Damien walked toward the elevator. Because there's something only I can do. The next morning, news crews gathered outside the bakery, not because business had recovered, because rumors spread that Damien Moreau was finally coming to confront the woman everyone blamed. Dozens of cameras lined the sidewalk. Neighbors watched from apartment windows. Customers stayed away. Nobody wanted to become part of the spectacle. Inside, Clara quietly arranged fresh croissants in the display case. The bell above the door barely rang all morning. Then, At exactly 11 o'clock, the distant sound of engines rolled through the neighborhood. One black limousine appeared, then another, until nearly 20 identical vehicles filled the entire street. Reporters rushed forward, microphones lifted into the air. Camera shutters exploded. He came! He's finally suing her. This is the end of the bakery. The lead limousine stopped. A chauffeur opened the rear door. Damien stepped out wearing a dark navy suit. No sunglasses, no security rushing ahead. He walked directly toward the bakery. Behind him, several employees carefully unloaded large white boxes. Not one, not 5. Dozens, each identical, each tied with silver ribbon. People whispered, "What are those? Legal documents? Evidence?" No, they were cakes, wedding cakes, every single one originally prepared for the engagement celebration that had never happened. One after another. The boxes were carried inside the bakery until the front counter disappeared beneath them. The room fell completely silent. Clara looked from the cakes to Damien. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, he faced the cameras instead of her. His voice carried through every microphone. The woman standing behind this counter did not destroy my engagement. Another long silence. She saved me from a marriage built on a lie. Reporters froze. Damien rested one hand on the nearest wedding cake. She was offered more money than most people earn in years. She refused, not because she hated me, because she respected the truth. He looked toward Clara. His expression was softer than anyone had ever seen. She refused to decorate my lie. Another pause. The street had become so quiet that even the hum of refrigerator compressors inside the bakery could be heard. Damien smiled. So today, I'd like her to bake. The first honest cake of my life. No one moved. No one spoke. And for the very first time since this story began, every camera in the city stopped looking at the billionaire and turned toward the woman who had never once been willing to sell a lie. The silence inside the bakery stretched so long that even the television crews forgot to speak. Dozens of wedding cakes stood between Damien Moreau and Clara Bennett. Each one had been made for a celebration that would never happen. None of them had been served. None of them had ever carried the words, "the perfect couple." Clara slowly walked around the counter. She looked at the cakes one by one. Perfect white icing, handmade sugar flowers, hours of work, enough desserts to feed hundreds of guests. She finally looked up at Damien. "You kept them?" He nodded. "I asked the pastry hotel to freeze everyone." "Why?" "Because they reminded me of the day someone valued my integrity more than my money." No cameras clicked. No reporters interrupted. Even they seemed to understand. This moment didn't belong to them. Clara rested her hand on one unopened cake box. "You shouldn't waste good cake." Damien smiled faintly. "I was hoping you'd say that." He turned toward the crowd gathered outside the bakery. "If anyone here has time, I'd appreciate your help." People exchanged confused glances. Then Damien continued, "Every shelter, every children's hospital, every senior center. I want every cake delivered before tonight." A reporter blinked. "You're donating your wedding cakes?" Damien answered without hesitation. "They were meant to celebrate love. They still can, just differently." Within minutes, volunteers from nearby charities began arriving. Bakery employees opened each white box. Children passing by were invited inside. Nurses from the children's hospital loaded cake after cake into waiting vans. An elderly volunteer wiped away tears. "I've never seen anything like this." Clara quietly picked up a knife. If we're serving them, they deserve fresh slices. Without another word, she tied on a clean apron. Damien removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, then reached for another knife. One employee froze. "Mr. Moreau, you don't have to do this," he smiled. "I know, but I'd like to." For the next 2 hours, the billionaire everyone feared stood beside the plus-size baker who had rejected him 37 times. Together they sliced cake, packed boxes, laughed when frosting accidentally landed on his sleeve. A little boy looked up at Damien. "Mister, have you ever cut cake before?" Damien examined the uneven slice in his hand. "I don't think so." The boy giggled. "I can tell." Even Clara laughed. "You missed the center." He looked at her. "I noticed. You didn't say anything. I wanted to see if you'd figure it out yourself." "I did. It only took 3 cakes." Her laughter came easier this time, warmer, natural. Over the following weeks, the story spread across the country, not the scandal that disappeared almost overnight. People remembered something else instead. The billionaire who waited in line for pastries, the baker who refused to write a lie, the wedding cakes donated to strangers. Customers returned, not out of sympathy, out of respect. The 1-star reviews slowly vanished beneath thousands of genuine ones. People traveled hours just to visit the little bakery. Many bought only a cookie. Others came simply to see if the stories were true. They usually found Damien standing in line like everyone else, sometimes carrying empty flour bags, sometimes fixing a broken chair, sometimes washing mixing bowls while arguing with Clara over whether blueberry muffins needed more lemon zest. They never agreed. That became another joke among the regular customers. One quiet evening after closing, the bakery smelled of warm bread and vanilla. Outside, the streetlights reflected softly across the rain-soaked sidewalk. Clara finished wiping the last table. Damien was stacking clean trays. Neither felt the need to hurry home. Finally, he broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up. "You just did." He laughed. "I suppose I deserved that." She leaned against the counter. "What is it?" He hesitated longer than she expected. "I'd like you to bake me a cake." She smiled. "For what occasion?" He thought carefully before answering. "Not a wedding." A gentle silence settled between them. A new beginning. She studied his face. There was no performance, no billionaire charm, no carefully prepared speech, only honesty. The same honesty she had demanded from him the first day they met. She reached for her order notebook. "What would you like written on it?" Damien looked at the blank page, then slowly shook his head. "Nothing." She raised an eyebrow. "No message?" "For the first time in my life." He smiled. "I don't need words pretending I'm happy." Clara closed the notebook. "Then it doesn't need writing. It just needs to taste like hope." He looked at her. "I trust you." It was the simplest sentence he had spoken. Yet somehow it meant more than every expensive promise made during his cancelled engagement. 1 year later, the bakery opened before sunrise. A line had already formed around the corner. Tourists, families, office workers, college students. Many had traveled across the country. Some wanted pastries, others wanted photographs. Most simply wanted to experience the place where honesty had become more valuable than power. Inside, the kitchen was louder than ever. Mixers hummed, ovens glowed, fresh bread filled the air with butter and cinnamon. Near the back work table, a tall man wearing a navy apron carefully spread frosting across a chocolate cake. His movements were slower than Clara's, still slightly uneven. She noticed immediately. "You missed the edge." He sighed dramatically. "I was hoping you wouldn't notice. I always notice." "I know." A new employee smiled. "She tells everyone that. And she's always right." The kitchen burst into laughter. Just then, a first-time customer stepped through the front door. He looked around at the crowded bakery before whispering to another guest. "Is it true? The owner once rejected a billionaire?" Before anyone else could answer, the man in the apron stepped out from the kitchen carrying a tray of fresh cinnamon rolls. He smiled. Twice. Clara looked over from the decorating table. "Actually," she pretended to count on her fingers, 37 times. Damien nodded. "The best 37 rejections of my life." The entire bakery laughed. Together, they carried one final cake to the front display. No gold decorations, no elaborate sugar flowers, just smooth white icing. Simple, elegant, honest. At its center, only 3 words were written. Made honestly. No perfect couple. No perfect ending. Only 2 ordinary people who discovered that real love doesn't begin when someone finally says yes. Sometimes it begins with the courage to keep saying no until the right person learns why.